than Abu Jahl is. So he's not someone that you see pouncing on the Muslims, pouncing on the Prophet ﷺ, suddenly pulling out his sword and fighting people. He's someone who's constantly planning in the background and scheming as to how to stop Islam from growing in Mecca. And they used to say that the three wise men of Quraysh, who all became idiots when Islam came to Mecca, Abu Jahl, whose name was Abu al-Hakam, the father of wisdom, Utbah, the father-in-law of Abu Sufyan, and Abu Sufyan, they all took, subhanAllah, things that were completely opposite of what their stances would have been in the days of ignorance in regards to the Prophet ﷺ. So everything was counterintuitive about how they responded to the Prophet ﷺ. But still, in keeping true to his character, he's someone who schemes against the Prophet ﷺ. And he's someone who will incite the violence, but who rarely be actually seen holding the sword and actually abusing people in public, because he's kind of trying to maintain a reputation. He's also someone that continues his trade routes even during the first several years of Islam. So many of the Meccans go on high alert, right? They're like, we have to solve this rebellion from the inside and squash this message. Abu Sufyan still goes to Yemen, he still goes to Asham, he still carries on growing his business and growing his trade while he's scheming against the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca. Now, one of the things that happens is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests each and every single one of these men by someone of their own family, their closest relatives, becoming Muslim in the earliest batch. So his daughter, Habiba, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, is considered to be the second person from Banu Umayyah to embrace Islam after Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. She's the second from the tribe to embrace Islam. She's one of as-sabiqun al-awwalun, one of the first Muslims, his own daughter. And this caused a lot of trouble to Abu Sufyan. It was embarrassing to him. Now she's married to Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, so she's not technically living with him, but it's still a huge embarrassment that his own daughter would embrace the Prophet ﷺ's message at a very early point of the call to Islam. And of course, his own daughter as well as his cousin Uthman are both amongst those that migrate to Abyssinia to escape the persecution of Mecca. So Abu Sufyan's daughter embraces Islam along with her husband, along with her cousin Uthman. They flee the persecution of the likes of Abu Sufyan and Utbah and others taking place in Mecca. Now Abu Sufyan, this is to give you some important context to the Battle of Badr, to him all of the wealth of the Muslims was fair game, including his own family. So once his own relatives go to Abyssinia, he confiscates their homes, he sells their homes, he includes it amongst his caravan. So he's actively stealing the wealth of the Muslims, including his own relatives, and consuming that and making it part of his caravan and basically making his caravan larger and larger and larger and larger. The reason why this is so important is that when you get to the Battle of Badr, it all starts with the caravan of Abu Sufyan, right? And you can imagine what precious wealth is in the caravan of Abu Sufyan, who shows no regard for the wealth of the Muslims, including his own in-laws. And there's a very famous story about Abu Ahmad Abd ibn Jahsh and his home, which was considered one of the best of Mecca. And he was a blind man. His home being stolen from him, sold, and then included in the caravan, the money being included in the caravan of Abu Sufyan. So he takes these caravans, and how does Abu Sufyan basically save face? So I want to give you just this high level. When you read about the munafiqun, when you read about the kuffar, the disbelievers of Mecca, spending money in charity and expecting a reward, it's usually talking about Abu Sufyan. Because the way Abu Sufyan covers for all this exploitation and the way that he covers for all of the stealing and all of this abuse with his wealth is that he gives a lot of money in charity, right? He finances many of the military endeavors and the tribal endeavors of Quraysh. He does a lot that earns him face amongst his people, but subhanAllah, all of it is being spent fi sabil al-shaytan, in the way of the devil, right? And to actually oppress and to actually harm. Now with all of that, Abu Sufyan comes to learn that his daughter Habiba, receives a marriage proposal from the Prophet ﷺ. Think about this marriage. Because Habiba's husband dies in Habasha, and we talked about her radiyallahu ta'ala anha already in this series. Habiba is in Abyssinia, a widow. The Prophet ﷺ is in Medina, Abu Sufyan is in Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ sends a marriage proposal to Habiba in Abyssinia. The news of that reaches Abu Sufyan, who's trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. Talk about an international, like this is before Zoom nikahs were even a thing. Like this is all happening international, across borders, in very different political climates. But to give you an idea of the mindset of Abu Sufyan and the way that he thinks and how tribalistic of a man that he was, when he heard that Habiba received a marriage proposal from the Prophet ﷺ, he said the words, ذَاكَ الْفَحْلُ لَا يُقْرَعُ أَنْفُ, that is a noble stallion who should not be rejected. You know what? I'm trying to kill the man, and I can't stand him, but at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ comes from a noble lineage, and so at the end of the day, my daughter is marrying someone from a noble lineage. I'm okay with this. I'm still going to try to kill him, but I'm okay with this. At the end of the day, my daughter is in good hands now. She's now part of, again, the continuation of a noble lineage. So he's got a very strange, tribalistic mindset, and he enters into this arena of opposition to the Prophet ﷺ from these very base places, right? It's not like a noble type of opposition, right? It's tribe and money, tribe and money, tribe and money. Now, after the Prophet ﷺ escapes and flees to Mecca, this is where the story now really starts to take shape. Abu Sufyan is still now in the second tier of the main opposition to the Prophet ﷺ because his elders are still alive, right? So Abu Jahl is still alive, Abu Lahab is still alive, Utbah is still alive, Umayyah is still alive, Al-Walid ibn Mughira is still alive, Al-As is still alive, right? These are still sort of the elders to Abu Sufyan that are opposing the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Sufyan is in their group, but he's still slightly younger than them. The Prophet ﷺ, as he flees to Medina, he commissions these raids on the caravans to try to intercept some of what was stolen from the Muslims. And so as the caravans are going out to Sham, and as they're going out to Yemen and they're returning, the Prophet ﷺ is trying to intercept some of those caravans. So what happens with the Battle of Badr? The Prophet ﷺ comes to know about the caravan of Abu Sufyan returning back to Mecca. And the caravan of Abu Sufyan had 1,000 camels and over 50,000 dinars worth of goods. It had much of the consumed and stolen wealth of the Muslims. And so the Prophet ﷺ sends a battalion, not an army, a battalion, to try to intercept that, which explains why you had such a small number of people on the side of the Muslims that weren't equipped for a battle when Badr happened. They didn't have camels, they didn't have horses, they didn't have their full armor. They had things that could keep them light in the desert, right? While they tried to intercept the caravan of Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan hears about the plan of the Prophet ﷺ. So he diverts his caravan, his huge caravan, and he has 40 guards to that caravan. So you can see how much he treasures that wealth. So you got a whole army of sorts protecting the caravan, and he takes a different route. He alerts Abu Jahl and the leaders of Mecca, and then they go out to meet the Prophet ﷺ and that small group of Muslims around the area of Badr. And that's how the Battle of Badr is going to take place, right? So Abu Sufyan escapes the Battle of Badr technically because his job is to actually safeguard his caravan from the Prophet ﷺ and from the Muslims before the Battle of Badr. However, most of the leaders of Quraysh are present in the Battle of Badr. Some of them didn't want to go out, including, by the way, the father-in-law of the Prophet, the father-in-law of Abu Sufyan himself, Utbah. He really didn't feel like it, but Abu Jahl was insisting. In fact, you have narrations of Abu Sufyan saying, look, we've got the caravan safe. There's no need to engage in battle now. Abu Jahl is the one who's insisting on trying to wipe out the Muslims while we have them vulnerable. So Abu Sufyan, his job was to protect the caravan. Abu Jahl is shaming the other leaders to go to battle with the Prophet ﷺ and to take advantage of the situation and to kill their own sons, right, in this battle, and has a vengeance to him that everyone else is just kind of going along with. Abu Sufyan's not participating. However, his oldest son Hanzala and another one of his sons participates in the Battle of Badr, as well as his father